Welcome back, everyone. We're going to be looking at SUPIR Upscaling Pack version 2 with Hyper. So there's a new thing that came out, ByteDance. And as you can see right here, we've got the model page. And what I'm going to recommend is you go over to Files and Versions and grab the Hyper SDXL 8-step Lora. That's the one that I ended up sticking with. It says here there's also a CFG Lora, which I haven't tried, but I've done this one for now. Maybe we'll do a follow-up and see what this one is like. But I've done this one for now. Right. And if we go over and have a look at the first workflow we're going to look at in the pack is the COS Trio SUPIR Hyper 8-step. So this is the basic workflow. So we've got our cosXL model and our non-cosXL version of the same model, right? That's what we've done. And then I made a slight change, which was that I put the Hyper, the Hyper SDXL Lora on this stack and then parented this one. So right now, the Lora that I'm using for my style model is not loaded. We've got the Trio triple latent, and then we've got SUPIR down the bottom. All right, nice and simple. So this will be the preview for stage 1, and this would be stage 3, and that's the image that we get now. This has got no Lora loaded, so it's just using the current prompt I have to make a cool image. So now what I'll do is I will do that, and it's on random, so it's not going to be an exact match, but it's going to make something like this. It still has the compare. Okay. Whoops. If we just zoom in, still has the compare, and you can see it's doing a nice. I call it non-destructive because it isn't bringing in anything new, and it's not taking away anything major. It's just sort of retexturing the whole thing to make it more high detail. I've set it to 4096 by 2160. So if the dimension you're working with ends larger than that, it's going to cap it there. So you'll never get larger than 1496 by 2160. And the idea of that was just so that I get a good upscale. Because I think the initial I would put 2048 to go 2x, but I want to go 4x. But then, of course, I don't want it to be making 4096 by 4096. It'll just make 2160 by 2160 if it's more 1-to-1. So the major change with Hyper is we changed the steps to 8, and we put the CFG scale to 1 and 1.2. Pretty much everything else is left the same. If you want to try and get more change, you want to slightly increase the S noise value. If you go higher than 1.03, it's going to start getting that hard contrast thing that happens if you use DPMPP. I mean, look, it could be situational. With the type of stuff I've been working with, these settings work great. So here we go. Now it's making something that looks like it came out of the Lora. And it's adding in more detail for me. Okay. If we just take a quick look at the Hyper settings to the stages, what we've done is we've gone with 8 and 1 with EULA and SGM uniform. Some people were saying DPMP3. Other people were saying DDPM. I tried them all. And it's whatever you think works best. You're going to get something different. But the thing is, I know that when I trained the model, it was trained on images like this. Now, there is something else going on here, which I did want to talk about today, and that is the prompt. So this is using a prompt editing technique. And the thing is, usually you'll find it in stuff like dynamic prompts. Okay. And the idea was that for most of the generation, it uses Offworld. And then for the rest, it uses Paradise. And then the Jungle City. But the thing is, it depends what custom nodes you have installed. If you don't have all of the ones that pass these prompts, they kind of don't work in the same way. But what I can do is I can try to show what's going on here. If I put, if I just flip these values, so now I'll just do that. So then it's going to do this for a small amount and then this. And this is obviously like it's switching from one to the other at the breakover point. I should have really put it on a fixed seed to get the best of this, but it's okay. It should be different enough to show. It'll be the same now. So the basic idea of this workflow is to use Hyper on both sides, eliminating the need for the lightning Lora. And, is it faster? I don't know, but the quality is good. And it seemed to be sort of the same amount of time. There's quite a lot going on here. So you can't really sort of say, oh, Hyper is going to make SUPIR really fast because we were already doing 10 steps anyway. Now we're doing 8. So it's sort of like, but the quality is good. So that's all I really care about. And it's a small change. So if you've actually built your own workflow, all you got to do is get the Hyper SDXL 8-step Lora and load that in place of Lightning. And then, like I said, you use 8 steps with 1 CFG. I mean, you can go up to 1.5. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to check out the Lora CFG version that they've made, but I haven't downloaded it yet, so I'll save that for later. But essentially what's going on is this Lora loader here is controlling like what's actually loaded to both. And then this Lora stack controls what's loaded for just this side. So this stack would be just for this, and this stack just for this. I mean, now it's using Hyper. You could probably just use one stack for both sides, but I'm just trying to show what was going on here. Before we had Hyper at the top and Lightning at the bottom, or we didn't even have Hyper at all, actually. So it's a slightly different setup anyway, So it's a way that you can have Laura's stacked just for this side, and then Laura's stacked just for this side, but then also have Laura's which are running on both sides. It's just a tidy way of doing it. I'm using the same prompt in the upscale as I am. That might be a good point. If I did change the thing, so I should probably change it there too, right? Always remember to change them on both sides, but they are separate. So you can just do a simple prompt down here if you want. It's up to you. So that pretty much wraps it up for this particular workflow. The next workflow is image to image SUPIR. So you're going to use the same variant. It's going to be cosTrio again, but instead of using the aspectsize node, we'll generate it from an image to image latent. Okay, so that's the image we ended up with. And with that, we'll go over to the next workflow. So the next workflow is very much the same. I've added a few things. So this is just a preview for stage 1 and stage 2, with the save node being stage 3. This is the final upscale for the SUPIR. And the difference that we've done here is we have taken the image, made sure that it is capped to 1024. So it'll scale it down or scale it up to 1024, preserving the aspect ratio. We then do the VAE encode using the model that we're going to generate the images with. We've got the same setup again. We've got HyperXL on the first Lora loader, which is individual for each side. And then we've got the combined one leading both. So then I'd put the style model, not the true world, there at 0.8. Okay. And if we take a look at the config, again, it's 811. So it's 818181 EULA SGM uniform. And again, we're using 4096 by 2160. And we're using 1.2 and 1.0 with restore EDM sampler. Okay, and like I said, the difference here is we're actually giving it an image to go with. So I've got a blend of styles from my Not the True World. So we'll go ahead and make that. Let's just go full screen while we explain what's going on here. So Not the True World, this style doesn't have any memory of anything even close to looking like this. And so what happens is in the first latent, we've got a low denoise of 0.4, right? I find that you have to keep them at least zero point 0.1 apart. Otherwise, if they're too close, you end up with it magnifying weird imperfections like what's happened here. I mean, this is a pretty good estimation of, you know, if we take this structure and make this. And so sometimes what I'll actually do is I'll take this latent and just connect it to this VAE, which basically skips stage 3. So then if you want to get something that's more accurate from this process, we're going to do controlnet next. And so then it kind of eliminates the need a bit. But if you want to use this image here, all you have to do is, as I said, drag the latent to there, or I think you can just bypass, and then it should just pass the latent straight through. It's probably even easier. But it's like one of the things about the triple latent process was that you are able to do stuff like that. You don't have to use all 3 stages. We could skip stage 2, but then it's just going to make stage 3 like stage 2. So it's better to do that one last and then tweak this value. But like I said, if I'm at 0.4, I would go for 0.5 at the absolute minimum next. And by the time you get to 0.75, it's really going to just be making stuff from the model memory, right? So if we run this image one more time, you'll see what I mean. So there we go. Look, it's actually pretty cool. But again, the higher you go here, the more it's going to go from the model memory. You want to be around 0.5 to get the best image to image blend of a thing to the style that you're prompting. Obviously, because I'm prompting like rocks and buildings, that's the best you're going to get out of it. But it's not very detailed. It's very sort of ramshackle. And SUPIR will fix that to a certain degree. But if you want it to be more like this, and if you don't want to use this just as an inspiration, right, to get like to get the composition and get some more composition freedom, just like noise patterns of noise that will inspire different stuff. Because like I said, when you upscale it, it doesn't come out looking bad. This is actually pretty good. The reason I'm using the same prompt for this entire set is because it shows you that you can get the consistency by training your own. So you make your own model mix, and then you train your own styles into Loras. You combine them together into a nice prompt. It's giving you a nice result. And then you start doing this. And what we can do is we can build up a whole bunch more images, which you could then use to train another style if you wanted to, or you could just use them because you can obviously use these images in projects. And at the end of the video, I'm going to show you another cool Photoshop process because people seem to enjoy that one last time. So stick around if you want to check that out. Now, if I just bypass that and do it again, what's going to happen is we're going to get the proper. See, it's jumped into what the model wants to make. But there is some similarity, as in there's a pillar here and a pillar here. I'll admit it's kind of ended up doing as much effort on the left as on the right. But that's because there's no depth perception here, right? This is as significant as this. And once you've rendered it to this, next it's going to do something like this. At least it knows that this is actually like in front of this. But that's probably just because of the lighting and the amount of blackness. It's by color, see? Right. So while it's upscaling that, we've talked about the denoising. We've talked about taking these off. So I'm not just going to start putting loads of images through here because really these workflows are very similar. All I've done is I've made them a bit more complicated every time. And hopefully you've got a grasp of what's going on now. We've got a prompt for the generation side with triple latents. All the previews are there so you can see what's going on. Okay. We haven't got much control at keeping it like this image, which is what the next workflow solves. And it does that with a combination of depth and canny. I did put sketch in, but it was almost too strong. And even if you weaken it, I just ended up turning it off. But it's all hooked up and ready to go. So we've also got some cool options for recoloring, which come in handy later. Like I said, try not to go too far, but we're going to take a look at the next model now. And that one is the COS Trio image to image controlnet SUPIR Hyper 8 step. And this is the one that we're going to sit on for a while. So first, let's take a quick look at what this is actually doing, because it's a bit complicated, but while there's less stuff to look at, because it's not been run yet, let's just figure it out. So the last thing is the thing at the very top. That is a custom color match import. So what we've done is, after SUPIR finishes, it does a color match check to try and make sure that there's nothing there to look at yet. It makes sure that your color match, so we can load an image, it'll rescale it, and then use it as the color match source with the final upscale. And that's useful because then we can make a bunch of variants of our highest quality image, just in different shades, different colors. And yeah, you could probably do this with color correction, but it illustrates the kind of thing that you can do just by doing different things at different points. Anyway, so what we've got is we've got the color matches, and then we've also got the left, right swipes. So this is a left, right that compares the normal upscale with the custom color upscale. This, I believe, is the second pass. So I took the second pass output, right? Whoops. I took the second pass output here, and then I took that image, because sometimes it would have an interesting color structure to it. So I used that one as the blend. For this one, I've used the input image after it's been resized as the color reference, because normally it uses the final generated image, which it upscales and then makes sure after the upscale that it's still got the color matched. Really clever. And like I said, I wanted to see if I could explore it to do like a cheap man's reshade, and it does work. So this is fixing the details for this building here. And then if we look at this, I've put the original image that I wanted to image in. And I'll admit, it's a bit grainy and blown out, but that sky's really good. So what I would do is I would mask out the sky and then replace it, you see? So like we'd have this building with this sky. And then even more, we'd take the shadows from this one and then perhaps do a 50% blend. Oh no, you can't really. I was hoping you could do a 50% blend with the foreground from this one, like just the red ground. So it's like, just creatively combining the outputs which you've put a spin on in the first place intentionally so that you can put that together at the end. It sounds more complicated when you actually put it all out like that, but when I show it to you, it's going to be super simple. So let's just close this tab and get over to one that was already running. And then we can kind of see what's actually gone on here, right? So what I've done is I've used an image from one of my anime models. We've pumped out this sort of futuristic looking street. Okay, it's from my something to do with Thora illustrations, I think. So we put that into the encoder. We're loading Hyper. And we've obviously got not the true world loading from this stack here. We're using real jugs, cos real jugs, and we're using real jugs, non-cos on the SUPIR side. All the seeds are matched just like before. And then we're loading the image that was resized, our image that we put into the encoder. We're also sending into Zoe depth. We're also sending it to Canny Edge and image desaturate, which prepares it for sketch. But we don't use sketch. It's just there if you want to use it in your project. It's a bit strong, you see, for the fine detail. Generally, I was experimenting with using it in the middle at a week, but usually what I do is I use it at the very end, like it'd be 0.75 to 1 usually. But this was too strong, so I just turned that off. I did do so it's 0 to 0.4 at half strength on Canny, and then 0.8 for the whole range for the depth. Okay, so there's my Canny map. And there's my depth map. And obviously that's going into a control stack, which is going between the encoder and my reroute. So it's nice and easy to just put that there. And then all of these 3 samplers are using the control net. Okay. And so then what you end up with is image 1 at 50%, image 2 at 75%, and then finally image 1 at 1.0, because I'm trying to create new landscapes that incorporate my style, but I want them to be close to the image. So for example, if I was picking a photo of the Manhattan sort of cityscape from the bay or whatever, I'd want it to have the same outline, the same depth and features. So even though all the buildings will change and the environment will change, and it will be in this style of artwork, it's gonna mimic the dimensions and the arrangement of the structures, even though it's just going to do whatever the heck it wants for, what the textures and the details are going to be. So that's what's going on there. Right. And this is all pretty much the same except for the control net. That's new. And obviously the hyper, that's new. So like I said, this is all part of version 2. So like before, we're coming in, we're doing 4096 by 2160 because I find it's not a big deal. The time difference isn't huge. We're using 1.1 and 1 for the CFG start and end with Restore EDM. I find that works nice with Hyper, although I'm sure that you could tweak the values a little bit here and there and maybe get a better output. I like how it's looking at the moment, though. If we just have a look at this here, this is pretty good. So if I go from there, it's blurry, right? And then if I reveal the details, it's not too much. It's not too little. There aren't many mistakes. Sure, it can be a bit rough in places, but this is supposed to be like a post-apocalyptical type weathered environment that I'm putting together here. Or I wouldn't even say post-apocalyptic, but certainly it's not like golden age stuff, everything's supposed to be old. Right. And so then this is the part where it gets interesting. So for the color match, right, what we've done is we've used the color match from the final render, the final generation step to do this one, right? And then for the next one, I decided to use the original input image. And so for this one, it's tried to use that color range data. Yeah. So it's got this red tint on everything because it was quite a predominantly red image. And then for this one, I've used the middle, because the middle image, if you remember back here, that's the middle image there. I've used this one for the last one. I didn't use this one. I used the actual original. So it's a bit confusing because the order doesn't match, but it makes more sense from here because from here, things line up. So that's the actual image that we're swapping to and from here. That's the actual image that we're swapping to and from here. And that's the actual image that we're swapping to and from here. And I explained already what the other images were. So we're comparing 2 images. So then I decided, well, as I explained initially, I thought, well, how creative can you get with this? And it turns out actually it's pretty good. So it doesn't like mimic details. It's only going to mimic colors for this. So if there are predominant colors, you will see them expressed in the image. But what I like this for is not for the whole image, right? It's because every now and then we get this subtle coloring, which looks like noise, right? It looks like noise because it's really rough. But the thing is, if you had a 20% blend with a 5% flow and you just scrubbed at it for ages as a mask layer on top of the composition, you're going to end up having this sort of bleach in to the shadow. And it's the same for any color that you see. You can have it just kind of leaking through and you can mask out where you're painting. So I would like make a little circle with a lasso and just scrub away at it and just get some of these colors because the noise is actually nice. It looks bad when you look at it like this, but the weird thing is that when you start having these different color combinations leaking through in certain areas, it actually looks really good. It's just my opinion. Like you've got this subtle green glow coming off the side of the thing. Things like that. And like I could make some of the rocks redder with a little repaint. I could say, oh, I want a little red streak here. Maybe there's like a red vein in the rock, um, stuff like that. Also, what I didn't do, which I want to talk about when I show it, is stuff like this here. And there's two ways to solve this sort of thing, because this is a nightmare to mask. So obviously you could get a pen tool and you could pen around this, right? Or you could use object selection if you use Photoshop. It's going to just, you could just draw a box around that and then you've got it selected. But the thing is, it's just a bit of a nightmare. So what I tend to do is I cheat by ignoring it, deciding that it's actually not in the foreground, and then we draw a little area around the base and just delete it, and it'll use the grass. And then it's just a bit further away now. Do you know what I mean? It's easier to do stuff like, because it's a really nice feature. But I think that when I actually did it, I might have accidentally masked it into this group. So it ended up getting super super depth blurred by the depth map. Anyway, we'll get there. So I don't want to get too crazy because we've nearly done with this. I just wanted to sort of show you, because before we had this weird setup where it was like lightning on one side for the SUPIR and then no lightning on the other side and all different CFGs. I thought, you know what? Hyper is like the new thing that people want to use. So let's see if we can get this to work with Hyper. And you can. And just as a sort of note, if you don't use the cosXL models, you can just use one model for the whole thing, right? There was an example of that in the V1 pack, because I know that you guys basically customize these workflows to your own needs. So, you know, it's just a note that you can drive. So everything that this is driving here could be driven by this if it's not a cosXL model, right? Because I just like using cosXL for the first stage, because SUPIR doesn't wash out the full color range, which is nice. So let's take another example up here, right? Let's see if we can get a new image. Okay, we'll use the cube. I mean, I've got no idea. I mean, it's mostly black with a bit of cube in the middle. I've got no idea what that'll do. And then what we'll do is we will change the seed. I'll do. And I'm not going to change the prompt. The prompt's fine. Like I said, the prompt is just this sort of prompt travel business where you go from one set of attention to another set of attention at certain steps. It's not actually prompt. And I think that the syntax requires a mod. Hopefully, I'm going to do a video on dynamic prompts and like how to best use them. But it seems like something that's been forgotten of late. And to be honest, I think this syntax doesn't work out the box. So don't worry about that too much. It's like using multiple style triggers and weighting them for steps. I want to look at a better way of doing it, because I'm sure there's better scheduling for prompt scheduling now. What we're going to do is we're going to change the image. I swear I already changed the image. Oh yeah, I changed the image to a cube. So now let's change the image for the generation. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this building, which we made in a animation video. So, right, that's one of the styles, but it's not the style that I'm prompting right now. So what I want to see is I want to see Off-World Rock House, pretty strong, and Neo Future Paradise. Oh God, okay, the prompt might be a bit scuffed, but let's just go for it. And it's going to go ahead and make our depth maps and our controlnet maps here. There we go, lovely. And as you can see, oof, that is a noisy sketch, but this is why I've turned it down. You know what I mean? So we got our initial image. It looks a lot like the original, just a little bit messed up. Get our second image. It's starting to look a lot more like the styles in my model. And then by the last video, it's really it's cleaned it up. But as you can see, if you zoom in, it's all blurry. So this is like the best we can do. If we did a dumb upscale, it would retain the blurriness when you zoom in on the bigger image, you see. So if we used like a Remicry, it's going to introduce detail, but that detail can be a bit squirrely sometimes. There'll be certain, I'm not saying it's it's a brilliant upscaler. And to be honest, if I used iterative upscale, which is Remicry with promptable denoising, where you can actually load the Lora in, that's what I usually have people make. Sometimes that comes out super blurry. So it's always a sort of, you've got to try all the different types and see which one is going to work best for you. But let's just take a look and see what SUPIR has done for us on this occasion. So if we just zoom in and look at the before and afters, you can see that that is a clear improvement. You can talk about accuracy if you want, but I find too much detail is better than not enough detail. Because if there's detail here which you don't like, you can get rid of it and you can keep the detail that you want. Whereas if you don't have any detail, like here, you can only make the image worse. But, you know, it's very difficult to add detail. So what I would say, like, much more time consuming, you know, you have to be a very high skill level to be able to just go in and repaint a building by hand. Okay. So this gives us a much better starting point where if we decide, oh, I don't like this feature here, you can go in and just fix that. And the rest is okay. But we're not done. So this image is using the input to do the coloring. And again, I like this. I like this. Okay, sure, it looks like an Instagram filter. Okay. But you could, for example, mask, overlay, and then you could use percentages, or you could use, there's so many, honestly, it's endless. It's endless. Once you start loading the images into a program and start messing about. But this gives you a nice, because you got the blue shadows as well, because you could just simply do a screen overlay at 12%. So all it does is kind of enhance the sky a bit because it looks a bit drab there, doesn't it? You could enhance the sky, maybe paint that in a bit more, and then keep those blue shadows that kind of cool off the image. So moving on, this one is the second latent. So again, and you see how the second latent still retains some of that blue sky? So layering these two together might give you a bit of a fake HDR sort of look. Also, the shadows on this one aren't completely blue. So it gives you like a midpoint that you could do maybe a subtract. So this is too blue, or you could have both of them together and use some other blend rule, some other blend mode. Okay. But anything's better than that because that sky is horrible. It's like depressing, greeny gray. Of course, it's linked in with the aesthetic of the style. So that's kind of why we've got it there. I think it's part of that whole ancient ruin painting type thing. So it's given us a bit of a sepia. All right. So there's the three images just without any comparison. So you can just look at what you got. And again, the detail, it looks really good. Like I said, it's not photographic, but what I've done here is a bit hacky. So the most accurate is going to be the one that matched the last output. But as I said, we're not done. So this is pretty cool. So as I said, I've got the glass cube. It's a predominantly dark image with a little bit of sort of prisming. And if we look at the actual image that we get this really cool high contrast image. And as I said before, if I didn't have this image, this is, you know, for the example project I'm going to show you in a minute. Obviously, I didn't have this image yet. I hadn't tried that. That's really cool. I like this because, again, this is really strong. So it's possible to bring it in as a multiply and then turn the, you know, anyway, I'm not going to spoon feed you. I hope you can tell that by having all of these different variants, it's possible to do a lot of things creatively in next to no time, because the tools are just there to be used, in my opinion. So these are all going to be in the pack. You'll find the link in the description. There's also the art demo, which I'm going to show in a second before we take a look at the Photoshop bonus project. I just wanted to show you some wipes on the actual art so you can see, we've started here and we've gone wipe, 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 and you'll see what I'm talking about. So it only takes a couple of passes and upscaling and whatnot. Then we get to the final result. So before we do all of that, it's time for me to show you. Okay, so let's take a quick look at this project. So it's actually pretty simple what's gone on here. So if I just take away these, so at the bottom, I've got the color shifted version of the scene. And then what I've done is I've put another layer on top of it. And this one is on a normal, but it has got a mask. Okay, well, it's basically the rocks and the floor. So the rocks and the floor, that's, there's the original image. And then when I turn my mask on, boom, the rocks and the foreground have been masked out. That's all that. So that's the second layer. And then the top layer, what we've done is we've masked out the sky. So I felt that the sky was a bit too depressing and grey. So we brought in the sky, and because they were the red buildings, not the purple buildings, we've then hand painted in the we've painted in the buildings with a bit of opacity, so pull the color through the layer. Like, I wish I could show you. I'm sure there's a way to do it where it actually like highlights, like a debug. Invert it maybe. There we go, that'll work. So if I invert the mask, you can see the opposite of what it's doing, and that does actually help a lot. If I invert the mask, you can see the difference on that top layer there. Okay. I guess that'll probably work with this middle one as well. Let's see. Invert. Yeah, there we go. Look, now you can see the mask. I just switch them around a couple times. See the difference. Okay. That is that. Put that back on. All right. And we're not done yet. So what I did here is I've obviously saved the project as a new name. And then we load up project B. And project B is pretty much the exact same as project A, only we flatten the image now. And then you just go into the neural filters. You open it up, and it's going to use the Adobe AI to do a depth blur. Okay. We've already done it, so we don't need to do it again. But what it does is it does a depth map on the image, and then it allows you to do a focal distance and focal range for your depth blur. And so then I just picked the settings which I felt worked nicely. So a hard depth blur in the distance, focus on here, and this was the same distance. So obviously this is in focus as well. And like I said, it came out nice, as we see here with the lampposts. So this is another thing with the Photoshop. See here, we've got this blurry post, which clearly has a base in the foreground, right? So what can we do? We can go to the object selection tool. We can go like this. It's going to select the post, and then we go shift backspace, and it's gone. Now, if we're concerned about that, we can get a brush tool out and fix it. I'm not going to, because, like I said, all we were really interested in was fixing that obvious overlap where I'd broken my mask. And so, like I said, now the image looks pretty good, actually, because this particular sort of mottling of the materials was trained into the model anyway. And I'm trying to take advantage of the fact that it messes metal up to do this sort of old industrial type look. Anyway, I think that's pretty much it. So that's everything I've got for you. That is the Hyper SDXL 8-step controlnet image to image SUPIR upscaling. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Do you want to know? This is why I come up with fancy names for everything, by the way, because this becomes a bit of a mouthful, right? Let's make another couple of images. So what do we got on this one? Currently, we're looking at what looks like a valley. Okay, so it's got this image, which is a previous gen in a slightly different style. We're going to see what it does. Looks like it made something a little bit more like this. That'll be interesting to see what it looks like on the upscale. I'm just going to go through a couple of them quickly for you guys, so you've got some more stuff to judge on. Okay, there we go. We've got our results here. It's come out real nice. I do like having the input image put into the end rather than the final. On this, see, with image to image, it could always come out washed out from the model. But if you want it to match the input image, this is definitely the best way to do it. It won't match it perfectly, but it'll try to use the same palette, I guess. So this is very close to the image that was put in. It definitely is like a cheap color correction, which I guess, obviously, that's what the node is, right? Color match. But it's just nice to see that working. Let's have a look at this. Ooh. This high contrast effect that it makes is actually amazing, because what we can use this for, we can use this in a blend layer. We won't do it in a demo today, but I'll try to put something together which takes advantage of that, because that's very nice. I'm probably going to end up running a whole bunch of these out of the back of my upscaler, just so that I can do this more. What the heck? So we've got our original farmhouse, but it's built a new rock factory in the background there. That contrast. Contrast phenomenal. So let's have a look at the original. Wow, see how you wouldn't want it every time, though, because even though it makes the background and the sky look good, the shack is terribly blue, and these rocks are horribly overexposed, whereas the rocks in this image look perfect. I wonder what this one's somewhere in between. It's almost like we've got a light recolor, we've got an extreme recolor, and then we've got a medium recolor, all based on the generation themselves. And then we've obviously got this extreme contrast. And you could say, oh, well, I could have just done that with a contrast node, right? But it's obviously doing more than just contrast. It is actually introducing these colors too. So I guess it's more like a color clamp. I don't know how this node works, to be honest, so I don't want to speculate too much. But if we take a look at this image, and this is an example of where often what I would do is I would clamp it at stage 2, because I found that stage 2 was actually making much more interesting. So like I said before, I hit Control B, and then we're not going to get this. This is a bit more of a different thing. It's kind of gone too far to the massive scale planes and hyper engineering type thing. See how this plane is like very small scale now? It almost looks like a road in a valley or something. But this, it's not quite, well, I don't know. You see the roads there as well, but I just mean this has got more detail. I prefer this. So yeah, I'm going to do another one. And hopefully the seed changes, because I didn't even check. But the point is, this image is going to get sent to the upscaler now. So as I said before, you can also, if you want to, just eliminate the trio completely and control everything off of one sampler, which is fine. I just find that a lot of the time using stages with different numbers can give you a bit more control, but it's up to you how you use the tools. This is just how I put them out. This is how I use them. We got any more? This is the last one, and then we can move on. So what do we got then? Ooh, that middle one looks cool. Ooh, yeah. It's kind of just monochrome now. I'm not being funny. This is the thing. This is just desaturated. Desaturated. Yeah. Weird. Okay. And then it does have the extra details though, like the texture for the rock and everything else. Trying to make this sort of grand scale architecture type stuff, right? Yeah, the middle one's good too. Wait. There's no change there. I feel like that might be hooked up. Right, no. Is there? If there is a change there, it's extremely subtle. I could barely notice it. Right, so what have we got on this one? Wow. This high contrast trick is really good. See, we're getting like the chromatic effect of the prism in the light there. It's kind of yellowish green. Wow. Okay, so I hope that helped you out. Like I say, we're going to do more of these little Photoshop things at the ends of videos when the videos get a bit longer. It's a nice little thing to do. There's loads of stuff like this, so I look forward to showing you more of them. And as I say, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.